and a sizable crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind man, the son of Timaeus, sat by the roadside begging. On hearing that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, son of David, have pity on me." And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he kept calling out all the more, "Son of David, have pity on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take courage, get up. Jesus is calling you." He threw aside his cloak, sprang up, and came to Jesus. Jesus said to him in reply, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man replied to him, "Master, I want to see." Jesus told him, "Go your way. Your faith has saved you." Immediately he received his sight and followed him on the way. Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to the Lord Jesus Christ.
We continue this Sunday in our celebration of the Year of Faith. We also celebrate today National Priest Sunday. So we honor our priests in a very special way this weekend, and I think it's only appropriate we acknowledge Father O'Connor for his commitment to us in the priesthood. You know, I told you I would bring in the documents of the Second Vatican Council in my homilies. Those documents, by the way, are available to most of us, I think, online. Perhaps those who are more technologically challenged as I, you can get them at your local bookstore. They really come in 2 volumes, and for $30 you can have these documents of the Second Vatican Council at your fingertips. Today I'd like to talk about the document De Verbum, the dogmatic constitution on divine revelation. That document that came from the council begins by saying, and I quote, "The invisible God, from the fullness of his love, addresses people as his friends and moves among them in order to invite them and receive them into his company. The adequate response on our part is faith, a complete submission of our mind and our will to God." I don't see a whole lot of television, but I recently caught part of a movie. And it was a story about a man who had been blind from birth. And through some marvel of science, had his sight restored. It was a true story. Well, I think at first you would imagine this to be a wonderful instant blessing. But the man found it extremely difficult, because he had to learn everything from scratch. He had never known color. He saw so much at once that he was bombarded. And so he had to learn to trust what he was seeing. That movie really is a metaphor of the Christian life and of Christian faith. Because sometimes we can become so spiritually blind for so long that even when our eyes are open to the truth, we need to learn to trust what we are seeing. We become so comfortable with our blindness that we're not sure we can trust what we think we're beginning to see. There There are so many misconceptions that people have about our church. I recently spoke to someone that I work with at prison. And she told me that she had been recently divorced, and because she was divorced, she was told that she could no longer be Catholic. And I said, well, who told you that? She said, my mother did. There are those who are remarried and feel that they are excommunicated or cut off from the church. There are those who obtain church annulments or are afraid to get church annulments because they're afraid that their children will be considered illegitimate. None of these things, none of them at all, are true. You see, we need to unlearn some things when it comes to our faith so that we can begin to learn our faith. And today's readings, I think, invite us to open our eyes of faith to the areas of blindness in our lives. If you look at the Gospel of St. Mark very closely, up until this point, we're about halfway through St. Mark's Gospel. You'll see that the only ones who really knew the truth about Jesus were the demons. The evil spirits that Jesus casted out. The ones who walked with Jesus should have known the truth. But they were blind to it. And they were even blind to their blindness. The scribes and the Pharisees who put Jesus to the test. The disciples, the ones that Jesus chose as his closest ones, who only looked for positions of power. The rich man who walks away from the very invitation of Jesus to follow him. The disciples who thought that they were better than anyone else, just because Jesus called them to follow him. All of them spiritually blind to the truth. Until today, when Bartimaeus, the one who is already physically blind, can see much more than those who have physical sight. Bartimaeus, who makes the decision to submit his mind and his will to God, even though he doesn't completely understand. He has eyes of faith, trusting Jesus could restore his sight. And he's not afraid to publicly proclaim it, even though others try to stop him. Unlike the rich man who walks away from Jesus, Bartimaeus becomes a disciple. And it says he follows Jesus along the way, all the way to the cross. Unlike the rich man who thought he could do it all by himself, Bartimaeus realizes and recognizes that he needs a Savior. This year we've been called to a year of faith. A year perhaps where we will be challenged to unlearn certain things that we thought were true. To open our eyes to the areas in our lives where we perhaps have been spiritually blind. To begin to learn to trust the things we spiritually begin to see with faith. And with the faith and trust of Bartimaeus. Sometimes we're blind. We fail to see Jesus as the outcast. We fail to see him in the prisoner. We fail to see him in the poor and the suffering. We can get distracted by legalism like the Pharisees, or the wealth and the comfort of the rich man. But today we need a blind man who helps us to see with eyes of faith. The God who moves among us. And he helps us to see that following Jesus is not about glory and honor or miraculous power. It's about sacrificing and suffering and serving and submitting oneself to Jesus. The gospel tells us that Jesus was willing to stop serve a blind man. And that's good news for us, because at times all of us are blind. We fail to see everyone as a child of God with human dignity. Sometimes we are blind to the truths of our faith. So may this year of faith help us to grow, to see better the God who moves among us, the God who addresses us,